We are at one this morning, the Country Club of Jackson, which is the domain of Ron Berman. They call him Mr. 59, and Elaine Crosby, who was LPGA president and won a number of times out there on the LPGA Tour. Thanks for having us at your home club.
Well, thanks for coming. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having everybody else, too. These players at the Wendy's Charity Classic yesterday, Pat Bradley and Cindy Fig Courier. Barb, is it Mucha?
It's Mucha,
yeah. She won at Lansing at Walnut
She
Hills
did, and she went to Michigan State.
All right, and Betsy King is here, too. These are names you know. Jan Stevenson,
right.
The first sort of supermodel golfer back in the day. And this is the LPGA Legends Tour.
Correct.
Which means once you reach a certain stature in your career, you are allowed to play on the Legends Tour.
That's right. It has nothing to do with age, of course.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to put it.
Sure.
I want to talk politics for just a second here, if you don't mind, because we have new numbers in the race for governor this morning. John Truscott from the Truscott Group is with us, and Gary Austin, the anchorman. Good morning, Gary.
Well, hi, MPS.
John Truscott, good morning to you. Thanks for being available on short notice.
Hey, no problem. Good Monday morning.
We are hearing Rasmussen polling that shows Rick Snyder has a 12-point lead over Lansing Mayor Verge Bernero, 49% to 37%. Does that jive in maybe what you would have expected in the very first poll?
Yeah, I think what we've been seeing most of the summer is that there's kind of, given the mood of the public nationally, about a 10-point partisan advantage to Republicans. Now, that could change throughout the fall as campaigns get engaged and things happen. But what we're seeing generally statewide and nationwide is that independents typically have moved much more conservative. And I think it's a reaction to a lot of the things going on in Washington. You know, that snaps back and forth from election to election. But right now, Republicans are poised to have a significant advantage going to the fall election.
Funny you should say that, because Rick Snyder had a 3-1 advantage among the independents, according to that Rasmussen poll.
Yeah, you know, I think there were a lot of crossovers. I mean, his campaign strategy was to reach out to independents and Democrats, and they talked about how, you know, in the end, the last week, that they really put a hard push on with the phones, with the outreach and things like that, and that was part of their strategy, and it obviously worked.
There are a couple names being floated now as possible running mates for Rick Snyder. One of them is former Senate Majority Leader Ken Sikkema. What do you make of that possibility?
I always laugh when you get to this time of year, because about every name that could be mentioned does get mentioned. I think a lot of the media and a lot of the pundits do it. They try out every name possible, but eventually they're going to hit on the right one. But you know, Ken's a great guy. He's working for public sector consultants now. Very, very bright, understands the situation, and has done a lot of the studies actually on how the budget impacts some of the policies going on, how to fix some of the problems. But good guy all the way around. But you know, again, I think we'll get to a point, and it'll probably start this week, where you'll have a name a day that gets trotted out there, and you know, eventually somebody's going to hit on the right one.
Okay, I'll give you another one then. The Senate Majority Leader Mike Bishop, the Republican from Rochester, candidate for Attorney General as well.
Yeah, you know, I don't think that he would be ready to give up the race for Attorney General, which is decided at the convention on August 28th. But Mike's a very knowledgeable guy. Worked, you know, if he didn't have to work with the administration, he works the legislature pretty well. He's a lawyer by training, good Oakland County base. So, you know, he brings a significant amount to the table.
Let me ask you this about the Democrat Unity event that they had on Friday. The big news that came out of there was not only Verge Bernero's strategy of pitting the boardroom versus what he calls room for everybody, which I guess is a kind of clever play on words, but the fact that House Speaker Andy Dillon, who Bernero defeated in the primary, stopped short of full endorsement for the Democratic nominee. Isn't that a little bit unusual?
I think it's unusual and a little bit of a surprise for everybody. I mean, you obviously have a unity breakfast. Everybody comes and endorses the ticket, and you know, I think he gave everybody quite a surprise. It was quite the chatter around town. And then he said, well, you know, he wants to sit back and talk to Verge and think about it and things like that. Obviously, a little bit bitter by the way things turned out. You know, if anything, I think Republicans had reason to be bitter given how some of the things that the Attorney General did. But, you know, hey, you move on. I think this will be seen basically as a footnote by the time we get to November. And, you know, the party always coalesces behind the nominee, and I think that'll happen here as well.
But it comes off as petty, doesn't it? Because after all, he is going to eventually support Vernero. I mean, they asked him, would you support Snyder? And he said, I can't see myself doing that, which is also kind of a vague answer. But, I mean, if you're going to have to do it eventually, why not do it right at the Unity breakfast so that you look like a good loser?
You never know what kind of deal he wants to try to cut. Maybe he wants certain people taken care of and urge to give that kind of commitment. Maybe he's looking for, I don't know what his motivation is, but I can say that in my recent memory, this was probably very unusual. I just have not seen that happen.
That thing kind of goes on in politics, deal making, and in terms of in return for endorsements.
Almost on a daily basis. What will be interesting is to see if this turns out, if there is some sort of deal cut, then you'll see the mood turn to, wow, that was a shrewd move. What a good political move. So that just tells you how the political winds can blow back and forth.
All right, thank you very much for the chat. Oh, what about Pete Hoekstra for lieutenant governor?
I know there have been no discussions. He said, election night is something, he would take a look at, but it's not something that he's pursuing or is particularly interested in, but certainly wouldn't count it out.
All right. Thank you very much. John Truscott with the Truscott Group. He ran the DeVos campaign, the Hoekstra campaign, and was Governor Engler's spokesperson through 3 terms.